Hello everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Get Crafty with Sally. My name is Sally Poole and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin Up. Thank you for stopping by here today. I really appreciate your time. This is the card that I'll be making today, and I have used two new sets out of the mini catalog, September through December 2023. They are on pages 26 and 27. It is the Winter Owls bundle, which comes with some fabulous stamps. The images are really beautiful, and there's some great dies with the set too if you get the bundle. And then also this standalone background stamp called Fragrant Forest. It's really beautiful, and this is typical of the Pacific Northwest. I am in Oregon, and this just looks like a big forest of Douglas fir trees, which we are famous for. So let me show you what you're going to need to make this card. I have a piece of pretty peacock paper, 4 1/4 by 11 for the base, and it's scored at 5 1/2. Hopefully I don't foul this up, because every time I change it to this cut, I do everything wrong. You'll also need a piece of basic white. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's a quarter of the 8 1/2 by 11 sheet. That is what I'm going to use to stamp the trees on. And then after I stamp it, I'm going to cut it down to 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. You'll also need a piece of smoky slate, 4 1/16 by 5 5/16. Those are kind of weird measurements, but I wanted the pretty peacock card base to show up a little bit more than the way I normally do cards. That's why I chose that size. You'll also need a piece of basic white, a scrap for cutting the owl, and then these two wing pieces. Then you'll need a piece of basic white for the inside, 4 inches by 5 1/4, a smoky slate scrap to stamp your sentiment on, and then a piece of pretty peacock. This is the layer that's going to go behind the sentiment, and it is 5/8 of an inch by 2 5/8 of an inch. So let's get started. I think the first thing we'll do is stamp our trees. So let me get my stamparatus. I've got a piece of grid paper in here, and I'm going to take some of this dot glue runner, and this is not the permanent one. You can actually use it and then pick your paper back up. I am going to tap my fingers on it a few times and take a little bit of the tackiness off of it. Let me line my grid paper back up. Probably don't really need the magnets. So I'm just going to, and you can see that I've drawn some little blue lines here. That just makes it a little bit easier if you're making multiples. It just shows a good spot to lay your next piece of paper down in. So the colors that I'm using for the trees are Shaded Spruce, Pretty Peacock, and Evening Evergreen. You can just use one color if you like. I just thought that this added a little bit of interest. So let me show you how I did this. Let me open these up. And some of you might not want to do this with your ink pads. I thought since these colors are so similar, really, that it was okay. You might contaminate one of your ink pads a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that. I don't think it's a big deal. So first I'm going to take my Shaded Spruce ink pad and I'm going to try to just ink up this little center triangle part of the stamp. Let me put a block under this. Make it a little more flat and stable. So if you angle this kind of at a triangle, you can get most of that. And I'm going to tip it up and take this point along those trees. Next, I'm going to take my Evening Evergreen and I'm going to ink up these top trees. I think I'm actually needing to re-ink this pad, but we'll see what we get. And then lastly, I'll take the Pretty Peacock ink and then do this bottom set of trees. So when you've got your stamp mounted on something like the Stamparatus, any kind of stamping tool, it's nice because if you don't like the ink that was laid down for the image on your first try, you can go back and add some more and fill in the spaces that are lacking. So let's see how we did. That looks pretty good. There is a little spot right here that could use a little more ink. So that is our Evening Evergreen. And I'm gonna grab a little bit more, apply it to that little tree and see if we can get a little bit better coverage on that. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I've already got ink on my fingers. Wow, a lot of ink on my fingers. So let me set this aside. And we'll close up our ink pads. So let's let that dry a little bit. And how about we cut our little owl pieces out. So I'm going to take my scrap of basic white. I've got the 3 dies that I'm going to need. I should probably tape them down. Let me grab some tape. They won't need much. So there's our owl's body. There is one of the wings, and there is another wing. And we've actually got quite a bit of paper left. So let's bring in our mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And we'll use our plate 1, a plate 2, and then we will put our dies and our paper in, and then put a second plate 2 down. Hopefully this will work because these dies are actually sticking out farther. I've got it backwards here for me. They're sticking out farther than my plates, so let's see what happens. It didn't cut the edge of that one quite perfectly, but I already do have some cut ahead of time. So this is what you're going to end up with. I didn't grab a piece of paper. There's kind of a crummy one. So there's one of the wings, and you can see that all of these little pieces need to be poked out. There's the owl, and it has a bunch of little pieces that need to come out. And then here's our other wing. And if you aren't familiar with dies, there are actually holes in the dies that you can poke something through. If you don't have a take your pick tool, you could use a pin, or maybe a toothpick would fit. So you can release your paper from the die. So those are the 3 pieces that we're going to need to assemble our owl. Set my dies aside. And for the sake of time, I don't want to poke all these out and make you wait. So I do have a set done ahead of time. And let me grab my chair for this next step. We are going to add a little contrast to the edge of the owl's wings so it's not so stark white. So I'm going to take just a little sponge dauber and my smoky slate ink, and you can use a little or a lot. I like using quite a bit on here because it does make the contrast better. So I'm just going to go up the outside of this wing, around the bottom of the tail feathers, and then up the side of this other wing on the outside. And then I'm also going to take the wings pieces. Not sure what this second layer of wings is called, or if it even has a name for that matter. And we'll just dab a little ink on that as well. And then let's do this second wing layer. I've just used basic white paper, but you could use the thick paper if you want. Okay, so there we have our pieces. Let me close this up. And now I'm going to take a fine point glue container. You could use your liquid glue if you want, but you'll have to be really careful. And I'm just going to go along let me get this glue started, the inside of this wing now, and I'm actually on the top of it. It's not the back, I'm on the top of it. And I'm just gonna dot some of this glue down here. Let's do this other one while we're at it. Close this up. Okay, now I'm going to make sure I have the right one. This one goes on the right. So I'm going to flip my owl over and I'm going to lay this down on the back side. And what you want to do is match this up to the top. Then I'm going to flip it over and then line this up here. Okay, can you see that? So let's flip the bird over again and put this other wing on. And kind of match up the top. And this doesn't have to be in the perfect spot. I don't think there is a perfect spot. It's going to look great no matter, well, I shouldn't say no matter what you do to it, because it could probably really be messed up. So there's our owl. Oops, I just scooted my chair into the camera. Sorry about that. See if I can get everything straight again. Okay, so let's grab our paper trimmer. And we'll cut down our tree panel. It should be dry enough already. So we're going to cut it down to 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. So I'm going to cut a little bit off the top here. As you can see, it's got some white on it. And then I'll have to go up to the top here to get my 5 1/8. And then you can decide which side you want to trim off, or if you want to cut a little bit off of each side. I think I will cut a little bit off each side. So this we want to cut down to 3 7/8. So there's that panel. So let's assemble our pieces that we can at this point. I'm just going to adhere this panel to the smoky slate panel with some tape runner. You could use liquid glue, or you could pop it up on dimensionals if you want. Try to get your margins equal on all of the edges, and then we'll put some tape runner on the back of the smoky slate panel. and attach it to our card base, and you want to make sure that you're opening at the bottom and that you do this right side up. How many of you have adhered something upside down before? Raise your hand. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stamp our sentiment. And I am using the sentiment from the Winter Owl set, the Warm Wishes. So I'm going to grab a scrap of smoky slate. And I had trouble stamping mine. I guess I probably need to trim the edges of the rubber stamp, which I never do. But it seems like as light as I press, I always get the edge ring. And I'm going to scoot this over more to the left edge. Oops, I didn't stamp that in the right color. Didn't mean to stamp it in smoky slate. You won't be able to see that. You need to stamp it in Pretty Peacock. So let's try that again. Rewind. So we'll give that a press. There, that looks better. Now you can actually see it. Okay, so now let's cut this out, and I am going to use my favorite set of dies, rectangle stitched framelits, which are retired, unfortunately. They are still out there to be had. I am using the smallest die from this little section over here. And remember, I'm scooting the sentiment more over to the left because part of this panel is going to go under the owl's wing. So we've got plate 1, plate 2, our paper, our die, a second plate 2, and we'll run that through and get it cut out. Okay, so there's our sentiment. Then we'll take our little 5/8 by 2 5/8 piece of Pretty Peacock. Put a little glue, I'm going to use green glue on the back of our sentiment. I'll get my little funky tweezers. And then we'll adhere the sentiment to the Pretty Peacock layer. Try to get it all even and straight. And then next I'm going to pop my owl up on mini dimensionals. So let's put some of these on here. I can keep them from sticking to my finger. Let's put some down on this second wing as well. That's pretty good. So let's pull all these covers off. Okay, I'm going to grab my card and I'm going to set my owl on my card, and I'm going to press this tail part and the lower wing here because I still want to put my sentiment under that wing. So let's put a little more glue on our sentiment piece. And then I'm going to slide it under this wing and see where I like the looks of it. See if I can get it straight. That looks pretty good. And then you can push the rest of your dimensionals down. Something that I normally don't do in my videos is put the inside panel in, and I don't want people to think that I don't put inside panels in my cards. I always do. I just don't do it very often on camera. So I will add one today. It's nice to have a nice clean white sheet to write on. You could stamp another little owl in here if you wanted. You could run a little piece of paper across the bottom. Do whatever you like to dress it up, but I thought it looked great this way. And also, those of you that know me know that I like bling. So a lot of times, well, most of the time, I add jewels to my cards or bows or something. I thought this was great just the way that it is, so I'm not going to add anything else to it. So here's this one. And you can see the nice contrast of his wings that we've added. Here's the original one. It doesn't have quite as much ink on the wings. It's a lot whiter, so maybe you like that look better. And then here's another one that I actually did with sponge daubers. It takes a little more time, but instead of using the ink pads, how I smunched the 3 of them down on here, I actually just took a sponge dauber, applied ink to the dauber, and then put the dauber onto the stamp, and then pressed the stamp on the paper. And I did that over and over and over and got this kind of a look. And I think it's pretty too. You could also, if you've got your stamp in a stamping tool like the Stamparatus, you could also add a little bit of Versamark with a dauber to the trees, tops of the trees or wherever, in little places, and then sprinkle a little white embossing powder on there. I don't think you would want a whole bunch, just a little bit. Heat emboss it, and then your trees would look like they had snow on them. So there's my card for today. Let me know what you think about it. If you have any questions, just leave your question in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Once again, I really appreciate you stopping by. If you like this card, like my video, please give me the thumbs up. Share my videos with your friends and family. And I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. It helps my channel grow. I am so happy that you stopped by and wish you a blessed Sunday, and I will see you next time. Thank you.